560theanswer.com.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Cortes, AOC-onomics.
Her big victory yesterday. She stopped 25,000 jobs from coming to Queens.
She's claiming credit. She really doesn't deserve it, but she's happy about it.
We were subsidizing those jobs. So for the city was paying for those jobs. So frankly, if we were willing to give Amazon if we were willing to give away $3 billion for this deal, we could invest those $3 billion in our district ourselves if we wanted to. We could hire out more teachers. We can fix our subways. We can put a lot of people to work for that money if we wanted to.
So I'm against subsidizing private employment because I want to use that to subsidize public sector employment.
Exactly.
Got it.
There.
And also, per the GND, AOC's GND, I would also like to use some of that to subsidize people who aren't interested in private or public employment.
Exactly. Mayor Bill de Blasio, this all came as a big surprise for him.
Instead of an actual dialogue to try and resolve those issues, we get a call this morning saying we're taking our ball and we're going home. I've never seen anything like it.
Well, I doubt he was surprised, and I know they're not friends, but he could have called Governor Cuomo because Cuomo was meeting with Amazon execs along with labor unions this week, reports the New York Daily News, to salvage the deal. But when Amazon refused to relent on its opposition to unions being formed among its employees, it put Cuomo and other pro-union politicians in a bit of a tricky spot. That would, of course, include the Sandinista de Blasio. And so you're going to stick us up on the union issue, then we're not going to break ground here. And that's how it went down.
Instead, more jobs are going to go to Nashville and to Northern Virginia. They're just going to expand those plants.
For more on AOC-onomics and matters at the border, we're pleased to be joined by Steve Cortes, CNN political commentator, former head of Trump's Hispanic Advisory Council. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Thanks for having me.
What about that? I mean, Chicago was in the running. We got down on bended knee again when this news came out, did Tiny Dancer and other polls to say, hey, we're still here. Come on over to Chicago. It's not going to happen. But AOC-onomics and the Amazon sweepstakes.
Right. My long-lost cousin Cortes, she and I might share a name, but not much else, right?
Yes.
Listen, this is one of those situations, though, where I have to tell you, Dan, I really kind of root against everyone.
Right.
Governor Cuomo, Mayor de Blasio, AOC, and Amazon, for that matter.
Right.
I'm not going to, for 1 second, praise Amazon. I think big tech has been very destructive in a lot of ways for America. And I think that they're rent-seeking, and I hate the way that Amazon, I think, abused their power and got a lot of states and localities to do ridiculous bidding to try to attract them. I think that's exactly what's wrong with crony capitalism. That big business can get breaks that no small or medium-sized business could ever get. So I do hate that as a policy. Now, having said that, AOC is completely wrong. I think in her thinking, she actually thinks that the state and city of New York have $3 billion sitting in a bank account that they were going to hand to Amazon.
Right.
That is not the case. They were giving them $3 billion of discounts, essentially, off of taxes. And again, I don't like this. I think it's totally unfair to small business in America. But they were they were handing coupons, more or less, right, to Amazon. It's not as though that money is sitting somewhere and can then be deployed elsewhere. And on top of it, as you mentioned, the idea that public sector jobs are somehow preferable to private sector jobs is just on its face, a ludicrous notion, because the exact opposite, of course, is true. Government never creates prosperity. It can only create employment, for example, by taking money from the private sector or borrowing from the private sector and creating a public sector job. Government instead should be all about creating the conditions for private sector prosperity, and that's something that's not being done in New York. It's certainly not being done in Illinois either, and we see people and companies voting with their feet, and places, Amy, you mentioned places like Nashville, lo and behold, red states doing incredibly well and seeing nothing but growth in both population and in enterprise.
And then with Trump's new, I just did my taxes, and blue states, we're getting hit hard. If you're middle income and you own a home, you're not going to be getting a return. You're going to be having to pay cash, and it's the same with New York and with California, correct?
Right. No, and I have to say too, though, to me, listen, I don't like it as an Illinois resident, obviously, but I have to say too that the complaining that is coming out of the high tax states, out of New York, New Jersey, California, Illinois, from politicians is really, to me, crocodile tears. I mean, rather than complaining that the deductibility is being limited, how about get your tax structure in line so that you're more competitive with Texas and Florida and Tennessee and all of these states that are thriving? I mean, how about taking a lesson out of their playbook rather than just complaining to the federal government? And by the way, particularly in regards to the property tax deduction, I have to say that is one deduction. In general, I love tax deductions, right? The fewer taxes Americans pay, the better in general, philosophically, from my perspective. But that was a clear giveaway to the wealthiest Americans because middle-income people, for instance, who rent get no deduction, zero. And then somebody who has a mansion in Beverly Hills gets a massive deduction off of federal taxes. So I do think that is something that shouldn't be, to me, local property taxes shouldn't be a federal issue. And if local property taxes are too high, and they are in a lot of places, especially here, it's up to local politicians to fix it.
But what about writing off business expenses? I mean, you have somebody who cuts hair and she buys scissors. She can't write that off as a business expense. That's not even on the form this year.
Right. No, listen, I agree. Business expenses should be fully deductible for every taxpayer. And look, our tax code, even though I think it got a lot better under President Trump, it's still far from great. Our tax code is still punitive to small business in many ways and still rewards big business. And that's not just my opinion. Just look at the tax bills that are actually paid by big business. Even when they post record profits, oftentimes the tax bill is either zero or it's close to zero. They'll be paying a percentage that is in the single digits. That's why one reason why I think it was so important for us to get the corporate rate down. I almost don't like to call it the corporate rate. I'd rather call it the small business rate because big corporations have never paid that rate anyway. But small business does and medium-sized business. That's why to get that rate down, as happened in the previous tax code, was so important. And it's one of the reasons that small business has been thriving under President Trump is the incentives have been normalized, I would say, for them, particularly in regards of small business versus big business.
So 9 o'clock this morning, President Trump in the Rose Garden, and by the way, you can hear his remarks on our airwaves live 9 o'clock. He is going to reportedly announce he's signing the deal that Congress sent to him, and he is also declaring a national emergency to secure other funding for the border security that he wants and Congress won't give him. You tweeted out that you think he's making a mistake in signing the deal Congress sent to him, that he should veto that bill. Why?
I do. I think it's a huge mistake. The biggest reason is, and by the way, I don't want the government to be closed. I would, if I were in his shoes, and this is what I'd advise the White House, ask for a continuing resolution so that we can continue to negotiate, keep the government open for a few weeks. But the biggest problem is there's a lot of embedded amnesty within this bill. And the worst version of it, there's several, but the worst version is the UAC portion, unaccompanied alien children. So young people who show up here without their parents. And they can be as old as 17, by the way. A lot of these are not children, but they're legal children. And this new bill states that anyone who sponsors or may potentially sponsor, believe it or not, that's the language, a UAC cannot be deported. In addition to that, anyone who shares a household with a UAC, with an unaccompanied alien child, cannot be deported. So, number one, that is, you're automatically putting literally hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of people into a non-deportable category, illegal immigrants. I think that's totally wrong on its face. It's terrible policy. But in addition to that, you're encouraging the trafficking of kids because kids become then a chip that illegal immigrants can play effectively to make sure that they're untouchable by ICE. And I specifically talked to ICE, a lot of people who didn't want to go on the record, of course, for understandable reasons. But I talked to them yesterday, and they're apoplectic over this. They just can't believe, particularly the part about may potentially sponsor a UAC. How is ICE supposed to determine who's a potential sponsor? How are they supposed to determine who actually lives in a household or not? You're asking ICE agents to suddenly become basically judges out there. You're completely handcuffing them instead of allowing them to handcuff the bad guys. And so to me, this is an amnesty that is totally unacceptable. It's inconsistent with the entire 2016 movement. And I don't think it's going to happen, unfortunately. It looks like the president's signing this, within minutes. But I'm one of his strongest supporters, and yet I'm being incredibly critical of him on this. This is a major failure. He's being played by the Hill, both Republicans and Democrats, by Speaker Pelosi most of all. He needs to veto this legislation and say, give us a CR, and I will negotiate with you, rather than relying on the feckless Senate Republicans who clearly didn't do their job, that they allowed this ridiculous provision to get into this bill.
So what should he do? You think he should just declare the national emergency and just go around Congress?
I do. I mean, and by the way, too, though, it's not going around Congress. Congress itself gave him this authorization.
Right, 76 law. Right.
Right. And by the way, I think it's a bad law. I said this last night on CNN. I think it's too expansive. I think it gives the executive too much power, quite frankly. But the Congress did it. So the idea that he's going around Congress is absurd. Congress specifically gave him this authorization. And it has been used for things as absurd as unrest in Burundi. President Obama declared a U.S. national emergency because of unrest in Burundi, a place that few Americans could even find on a map. So if unrest in Central Africa is a national emergency for the United States, then clearly a crisis, and it is a crisis, at our own southern border is a national emergency for the United States. Again, I don't love this law philosophically, but it is the law, and it has been for almost 50 years. And given that it is, he clearly has, in my view, the authorization to do this. So, yes, what I think he should do, yes to the emergency, no to this ridiculous bill. I don't want to play shutdown brinksmanship, though. Tell the Congress, pass a CR. And if they don't, and they may not, then at least that shutdown is on Nancy Pelosi, unlike the last one. This one would clearly be in their laps because the president is saying, I want the government open while we continue to negotiate and get these amnesties out of this bill. We did not run an amnesty, Dan. I mean, and Amy, this is not what we ran on in 2016. It's the antithesis of what we ran on. And so I'm really imploring the White House and President's supporters to get loud about this. And if he does sign it, we have to try to undo it as quickly as we possibly can.
He is Steve Cortes, CNN political commentator and former head of Trump's Hispanic Advisory Council. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
You bet. Have a great day.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro